welcome to Lead Live, reminding you of your personal genius and how you think in order to actualize what you desire.
Hello. I hope you're having a beautiful day because you can. So much of what we experience day to day is based upon our mindset. Today, we're focusing on the LEAD mindset. And what does LEAD stand for us with Lead Live? Leadership, excellence, and achievement on demand. Leadership is not something that we hope for that was in the past. It's not something that we expect to get to at some point in the future. It's literally the actions we take today based upon the feelings that we have that's directly, hopefully, synergistic with the vision that we have. And where did that vision come from? Some imagining and ideally some deep reflection within about one's own desires, fantasy desires that actually become a burning desire, or maybe they were burning desires to begin with. And then we say, want to see that materialize, manifest, and even more, want to make it a measurable goal. Even more, want to take action. I don't even know how because it's really a fantasy. Those are the best kinds of goals where you don't know how. In fact, the folks who have been wildly successful in ways that we've all benefited from, whether it was Charles Drew, study what he did, or whether it was Andrew Carnegie, study what he did, whether it was Maya Angelou, study what she did, or any other persons that perhaps get very little mention, the fact that they engaged demonstrated that they had some emotional investment in what they chose to manifest because it was part of their burning desire. So, what leads to leaders' effectiveness? That burning desire. At the core, what also leads to their success is a clear vision. May not be initially clear, that they are working continuously to clarify, even, and the operative word is working. They're not just musing, which is powerful and effective and useful, but they're literally engaged in some kind of mental, emotional, and physical activity in order for that imagining, that fantasy goal to manifest. So today is about the mindset. And I'm going to ask Jet to put a visual that I've been using for some time. And some of you have seen it before, but it's really about this notion of mindset. We all have a mindset. And typically it falls into one or another category. It could change throughout our lives. We may begin with a fixed mindset because we've been socialized in programs to believe things are either black or they're white. This dualistic thinking, they're either good or bad. There's no gradation. They're either fabulous or they're terrible. That's a fixed mindset where you can't see the possibilities. You only see what you believe is. And so many of us across this globe are in that space. Now, one could say there's a problem with that space. One can say that is a powerful space to be in that's led people to master things. They had a fixed purpose. Fixed purpose is different than fixed mindset. I want you to understand the distinction. Mindset says, this is my mental view of the world. This is my mental view of people, particular people, certain conditions or things like money, like a house, like a car. These are my perceptions. These are my emotional connections to those things. You can shift that mental mindset. You can move into what we call the growth mindset. That's where the real power comes from. Those who are remarkable leaders, they are continuously growing. Maybe not in the way that you and I can see. They're growing because they're responding to all the variables that affect their ability to get to where they want to get. And they're manifesting things along the way. And a lot of us are like, how did you do that? How did that person do that? Oh my goodness. Success just came to them overnight. Well, you can talk to athletes. You can talk to renowned artists of all kinds, painters, dancers, uh, dramatists, and you can hear their stories. They started when? Many, many years before they were given airtime, many, many, many years before they accomplished these things that we say is a reflection of manifesting success. And yet they all had in common a growth mindset. Now, not one that I may define as growth, or you may define as growth, or someone else. They were engaged in actively responding and looking at opportunities in order to move forward. So, what's the distinction? Well, it could be as simple as what you see there. The fixed mindset said, failure is a limit of my abilities. I am limited. Well, if we believe what scientists have continuously told us, even the geniuses, at best, they're performing maybe at 10%. It would be amazing if they're performing more than 10% of their capacity. And so, why are we settling with that? What would we look like if we were performing at 100% of our capacity? I asked a friend of mine that several months ago. She may be viewing this and say, yeah, that was me. And she said, oh, we'd be looking at that person like they were an alien. I'd like for us to get to that place. I think we come from that place. We are part of that place, and we go back to that place when we re-enter the spirit world. We're spirits in these containers, and hopefully we're taking care of these vessels we call bodies in the most humane and respectful way. But let me be very clear. We have the capacity to go from that fixed mindset of a glass is half full to a growth mindset. Excuse me, the fixed mindset, the glass is half full. Is that right? Am I right, Jet? Yeah. No, that is the growth mindset. I have to get it straight myself. I hope you're checking me. We want to go from a fixed mindset of I can't do much because all I can do is this, and all the models that I've ever seen have only done that. So that's the best I can do. To, imagining what has never been experienced in your lifetime and pursuing that. What would that look like? Growth mindset, failure is an opportunity to grow. And if you're like me, you understand if I'm not experiencing failure, I know I'm not growing. If everything is successful that I touch, I'm not doing something right. I'm just doing what's known. I'm in the space of what's predictable. The moment I move out of that space, there's uncertainty. Sometimes that's uncomfortable. The moment I move even further out of that space, there's great level of uncertainty. And if I don't watch it, there's absolutely fear drama that comes up. That's when we know we're in the right space. When that fear comes up, when that, what others call terrier barrier, that's when it's time for us to plow through. So let's talk about this. What I want to do today is go over three major areas. One, universal laws, not all of them, because there's many of them. I'm going to go over a few of them, and I'm going to relate them back to this subject today, the lead mindset. And I then want to talk about the path to leadership excellence and achievement on demand, and then come back to the mindset of leadership excellence and achievement on demand. Is that okay with you all? And I see we already have a comment from one of my favorite people, and I'm going to put that online. What is it? I believe in the growth mindset. The shift made a huge impact in my life. Actually, I observed it, at least some of it. I was recently told growth mindset is problematic for communities of color. I wonder where that comes from. Is it because people interpret that growth mindset dismisses our history? I am considering the mindset of the person who presented that, yes, that idea. Exactly. What are my thoughts? Listen, we benefit from knowing history. As you can tell, I love reading. I didn't always love reading. And part of the reason why I didn't love reading, because I didn't want to feel. And reading really entails a lot of feeling if you're really going deep with the reading, whether it is fictional or nonfiction. And I love nonfiction for the most part, a lot of research, a lot of articles, etc. But whatever it is, I also know that I didn't love reading because I was afraid of the history. I know some history. I don't know all history. The power of knowing history is knowing what you can leverage and what you want to avoid that doesn't serve the greater good. Doesn't serve self, doesn't serve family, doesn't serve community, doesn't serve society, doesn't serve the greater good. So there's power in history. And yet a lot of us stay stuck in that history and as though it is the gospel, literally. And that's a fixed mindset, literally. We can leverage history to grow. And that's the power of history. It's kind of like either the glass is half full, so there's potential, or there's not enough water. That's the fixed mindset. We've never had enough water. Well, do you have enough to drink today? Yeah, but I don't know if I'm going to have it in 20 years from now, so we don't have enough money. Let's plan for 20 years from now. Let's honor what we have. So, my thoughts directly is growth mindset is to all of our advantage. And how dare anyone, whether they're a person of color, meaning that they're Asian, they're Black, they're Latino, they're Native American, they're Pacific Islander, they're all the groups that I didn't mention, including those who are not considered people of color, whites. How dare any of us limit ourselves by saying we can't grow? In fact, that's the power of us. And if we're not here to grow as a species of humans, what's the point? We're just here to kind of move around and maintain status quo? Wow. Well, we wouldn't have what we have right now if that was always the case. We wouldn't have these kind of devices, the camera that I'm looking into. We wouldn't have the nature of what we have in terms of social media. We wouldn't have the edification that we experience and the different quality of nutritional food. We wouldn't have, you fill in the blank. So let's go to the universal laws. Thank you for that question, Tomoko. There are many universal laws. My intent is not to go through every single one of them. That's a whole multiple hour series. It's really to capture the fact that whether we are consciously aware of universal laws, they exist. And when we understand them and we literally honor them, all of a sudden, what we want in our lives just materialize. Well, they're already materializing because of our thinking, our thought processes, our feelings, and our behaviors. But when we're clear about what we want, then we let the universe literally work its magic and it materialize. And that's why when some folks know about individuals, and there are a number of individuals on this planet who are not formally educated, they don't have formal degrees like a number of us do, and yet they're some of the most brilliant people on the planet. They have not been formally educated, and yet they're highly educated. And they're living consistent with the universal law. So things just seem to happen for them perfectly. It's like that person is illiterate, functionally illiterate, requires his granddaughter to read everything. And yet he's got a multi-million-dollar business or a billion-dollar business. And your point is? Your point is, you study how that person behaves, interacts with people, engages with the world around him, and you'll understand why he's financially successful. Yeah, on the surface, it looks like he must be white. When you find out he's Black, well, what's that all about? Well, it must be that that person was highly connected. When you find that that person was literally a throwaway child, like a lot of us, what's that all about then? Well, a lot of it is because of that, what we call the lead mindset. And independent of the following laws, it's also because that person is living synergistic with these laws. So let's go to them. The law of relativity. It basically says that it teaches us that everything is relative. So we have problems, but in relationship to what are the problems that are out there? It's definitely relative. There's much more to that law and all the ones that I'm going to convey, but I'm just going to give you a very quick snapshot. The next one is the law of perceptual transmutation of energy. There's a lot of way to convey that, but all persons have within them the power to change. We talked about the fixed mindset, the growth mindset. So we all have the power to change the conditions in our lives. We really do. And a higher vibration consumes and transforms the lower vibration, meaning that as we think positive, and I don't mean in a kumbaya way, but it could be, I mean literally, clearly taking out all the noise that harms us, the negative energy, and only allowing that in that complements the spirit, complements the body, complements the emotional state. All of a sudden things shift. And people who were normally around you were like, "You changed. What's wrong with you?" And you're like, "Well, I feel pretty good. I feel pretty happy." Yeah, that's getting on my nerves. Speaks volumes. The universe lets that person move into a different space where it still works. So when that person comes around, may be perfect. You don't lose your love for that person, your care for that person. You're there if they need you, but they can't be in that space because they don't honor you anymore. So the law of perpetual transmutation of energy, we get to shift and shift and shift throughout our lives. I always say shift happens when we choose, and we're always in the act of choosing, but are we consciously choosing? Next one is the law of vibration. Everything in the universe moves. Yes, we think this book is fixed, it's solid. Literally, at the molecular level, this book has holes in it. It is not solid. It's actually moving and vibrating. The same is happening with this computer that I'm looking at, the screen. The same thing is happening at the camera. Nothing is 100% solid. Everything is vibrating. We most certainly are. And it's easy to accept that. It's hard to accept that a solid steel is vibrating and it's not 100% solid. The law of divine oneness. Now, this drives my very core, my behavior. And I don't know why. I had this wiring as a kid. I remember talking to at least a couple of brothers when I was a kid about the notion that we're really one. And so why are these adults treating us in these negative ways, etc.? And why don't they understand that we're them? And I mean, just little childish conversations that had profound substance. I know now. Then it's just defense mechanisms as a kid trying to figure things out. Divine oneness, the law of divine oneness. Everything is connected to everything else. What do we say? Do and believe will have a corresponding effect on the universe, everyone around us, literally. And the law of action must be employed in order for us to manifest things on earth. So this whole law, the next law of attraction, I I love it. One of my mentors talk about, well, what's the end of attraction? Action. The law of action, we just simply said we've got to employ, we've got to act in order to manifest things. Well, the law of attraction demonstrates how we create the things, events, and people who come into our lives. Then the law of cause and effect. A lot of us know this law, whether we are conscious of it or not. We put something out there, we get it back. And I always use the metaphor of a boomerang because as kids, at least a couple of brothers and I used to throw the boomerang, and it's powerful because it comes back with greater force. So the universe, cause and effect. Nothing happens by chance or outside the universal laws. Every action, including thoughts, everything vibrates, the law of vibration. Everything that we do, feel, think about, has a reaction, a consequence. The law of compensation, this is a powerful one for folks who really want to be, whether they consider it financially well off, or whether they want to be in a healthy relationship, or whether they want their family to grow in remarkable ways. It's all about compensation, right? The law of compensation says cause and effect applies to blessings and abundance that are provided for us. So the visible effects of our deeds are given to us in gifts and money, inheritance, friendships, blessings. We can go on. Those are the tip of the iceberg. I just wanted to go over those fundamentally. Think about how you function. Think about how you live. Think about the people that you know and how they're engaged. And you'll find those that you observe to be successful are likely operating in this way, and I'm not talking about successful just in terms of a job or they're owning their own business or their income. I'm talking about success in the classic way that we define wealth as faith, family, fitness, finance, and fun. All of that is just they're thriving. It doesn't mean that they're 100% perfect. I don't know that that exists in human. I don't know that it exists in nature. And yet, out of the imperfection, out of the chaos, is absolute pure perfection and beauty. And the degree to which we're living synergistic with the universal laws, we're closer to that. Okay, so now that you get a sense of what I'm talking about in terms of universal laws, let's talk about the path to leadership excellence and achievement on demand. And I'm going to be very simple. I'm going to simplify it. I'm going to talk about four main things. And you can find these main things in so many people's experiences, in books, etc. I'm going to talk about faith. I'm going to talk about emotional commitment. I'm going to talk about action. And I'm going to talk about responsibility. Faith, emotional commitment, action, responsibility. Faith in terms of focus. And what is faith? To me, it's unconditional love. When you are living your burning desire, you are in love with that, whatever that is, that burning desire. Maybe to leave a legacy for your family because the level of the depth of your concern, your consideration for them is off the charts. That drives you, gets you up in the morning, even when you just want to sleep in. It makes certain that you get enough sleep so that you're healthy in order to be able to function in the next moment. It ensures that you have a plan and that you leverage others' input to move forward, that you listen for understanding, that you guard against negating self and as a result, negating others or even circumstances, honoring that everything may have a purpose. Some of us believe that literally everything does if we allow it, if we learn from it, especially failure. That's that growth mindset again. So, why did I talk about faith, emotional commitment, take action, and be responsible? I don't know that there's anyone that is living that is not doing one or more of those things. That's the first thing. If you're alive, you have faith in something, and or you're emotionally committed to something, and or you're taking action, and or you're responsible for what is happening in your life. When you're doing all four of those, oh my goodness, you're powerful. Yeah, there are conditions that are outside of our physical, spiritual, conscious, even conscious understanding, but certainly influence that are happening. There's systems in place, there's transactions that are occurring independent of whether we want them to occur. That's real. So the question is, how do we look at those circumstances and ask ourselves, to what degree do they affect my specific vision, my goal, and how can I leverage them? If they can't complement, keep moving. If they don't serve, keep moving. If you don't understand, put it on the shelf and come back to it later if you think it may be helpful. But you keep moving. Faith, another way of saying focus, another way of saying having that burning desire, emotionally committed, action, being responsible. Let's talk about being responsible for a moment. It's so easy to blame. I didn't have parents. I'm not like others who have two-parent households, or my parents didn't give me what I need, or the system that reared me in social services didn't care about me, or I grew up in a wealthy environment and they just cared about money, or we can go on and on and on. And all those circumstances may be 100% accurate. And so, what do you do with it? Do you say, my goodness, woe is me. I will never be able to amount to much. So I just need to just get by until I die. Most of us don't think until you die, but that's what we're doing. We're settling. Or do we say, maybe there's a reason why my spirit chose those circumstances to learn, to be much more empathetic, to be responsive, to leverage all those circumstances for the greater good, for my own edification, so I can grow, so I can expand. What did I experience that I can leverage, that I can use? If I don't think I can leverage any of it, then move aside, keep moving, and look for what you can leverage. I'm using the word leverage, and I've always used leverage. I've always used the word sharing. I've always used the word support. Those are maybe the three key words I use a lot. I remember people laughing at me, not with me, laughing at me, because I used sharing so much when I worked at Sonoma State University back in the 80s, that when I was leaving to go to Stanford, there was a big send off for me and the students, and I think there was other folks, maybe faculty, staff, or administrators, who were basically using sharing throughout the entire event. And I was like, what the heck? Why are they saying that? And then the joke was on me. It was like, that's what you did. That was your honor, your wiring. Well, whatever your wiring is my point. Honor it. Ask yourself, what's the value of that wiring? Someone is waiting for you to show up, for you to lead in a particular space, and maybe not a space that you have any awareness of. I didn't know that I was going to become a college president at some point. I didn't know that I'd own my own business at some point. I didn't know. What I knew is I had a focus, and when I accomplished it, I created a new focus. I accomplished it, created a new focus. I accomplished it. If I had some distress, I tried to figure out what the point was. What was my contribution, or what did I had to learn from that? And sometimes it happened in a moment. Other times it took months. Other times it took years. But the point is, you keep moving. That's what leaders do. And it's wouldn't be a surprise to me that you have within you the level of leadership transformative power that literally could move an entire nation. And you're like, yeah, right. Who's she talking to? Did she smoke something? Well, my body doesn't like much of anything, so I don't smoke and I don't drink, etc. So I'm one of those classic nerds. Uh, and yet I've always dreamed big. I've always thought big. And I've always wondered who we would be as a species of humans when, not if, when we actualize our full potential. And I am just reminding you that you have the capacity to exceed your own high expectations. Just take responsibility now. Now, the mindset of a leader, what does that look like? The mindset of a leader, it's using your mental faculties. It's honoring the fact that your mind has at least two major parts. Just going to reduce it down to this. Now, scientists know that mind is much more complex than this, and they know that the mind is not just embedded in the brain. The mind is in every cell of the body, and it vibrates outside of the body. We don't really know where the mind is, but what we do know is that there is an intellectual component, a cognitive faculties, and then there is an emotional component. We call it emotional mind. And there's books written about it, there's articles written about it based upon a lot of research. So let's just talk about the cognitive mind and the emotional mind, the thinking mind and the feeling mind. So what's happening here? Most of what we do daily is driven by the emotional mind. You're like, whoa, wait, that doesn't make sense. I decide, therefore I do. Yeah, you decide, therefore you do, assuming that you're emotionally caught up in that. If your emotions are at odds with your decision making, let me tell you something, you're not going to do what you have decided to do intellectually. When there's a burning desire and emotional connection, all of a sudden there's coherence. I call it heart-mind coherence. There's synergy. And you're likely to manifest exactly what you thought about because you are literally feeling your emotions are connected to what you've decided as your vision, as your fantasy goal that you've operationalized. So feelings are absolutely critical. So you say, well, what the heck? What do you mean? And thanks, Nicole. You recognize that this is truth. Let me just say something. Just because you don't feel it does not mean that you can't feel it. And it does not mean that it can't be a burning desire. This is something that you intellectually are wedded to. You've got to make it a burning desire. If you find that you're doing it because somebody else wants you to do it, it really has no connection to you, then I say arrest that right away. Stop it. As I told someone recently who was pursuing a gig, has no emotional commitment. You don't want that gig. Stop it. Don't send out because the message to the universe is I don't want it. So whenever you get into an interview, you're gonna self-sabotage because you don't want it. Go for what you want. You deserve it. This is a short lifetime. I don't care if we live as long as 125. That's short in the scheme of things. We've got trees that live in thousands of years. Come on. Get focused. Do what works for you. So, how do you make those shifts? We're going to have a special session talking about using the mental faculties of what? Memory, reason, perception, will, imagination, intuition. Did I leave anyone out? Perception. I don't know if I said reason and will, but 6 mental tools. You can literally take those tools and reshape the emotional mind. But it's through changing what? Changing habits. And what are we? Haven't you heard the statement? Creatures of habit. Change the habit, change the emotional mind. All of a sudden, there's alignment. That's a whole nother conversation. That's a huge training. And it doesn't happen overnight, and yet it can. It can. So what I meant was doesn't happen overnight for most people, but it can. So what's the other part of mindset of leadership excellence and achievement on demand? Honoring, enhancing your emotional mind, critical. So I started off with mental faculties, you leverage them, you enhance, you honor it first, and then you enhance it. And then you commit to being unwavering in manifesting your vision. What does that mean, unwavering? You have a commitment. You have written it down. You're looking at it every day. When you wake up, you're looking at it every night before you go to bed. You're dreaming about it. You're imagining. You've created a picture that you look at as that's what it looks like when it's manifested. It's got these colors, and you're imagining when you're in meditation when you're in a meeting because where are you, guy? Where are you, gal? I'm here. You're imagining how this particular meeting is going to help you get to that next place. You're imagining how your family is going to experience the rewards, whether they're your cousins, your niece, your nephews, your children, your husband, your wife, your grandparents, your parents. You're imagining. Everything starts with imagination. Imagination is considered the most powerful tool we have. And yet, we're so discouraged from using it. We see a child maybe online in Zoom now, seeming to look up in the sky. That person is thinking, is processing, is imagining. And yet we say, focus. Well, that person was focusing, but just not in the way that you understood. If you understand how children learn, most of us don't. And most of us are not equipped to even facilitate the learning of children. But if we were, we would understand that's where you're accessing information. You looking down, you tend to be accessing what you already know. We're remarkable. There's so much knowledge that's out there, and yet we only know a small amount. And we don't have to necessarily read everything or have everyone give it to us. We can actually go inside and access it. Let that intuition guide us because we know when we know, when we know, we don't need anyone to tell us. We just know it. It's like, well, how do you know? I know. Did you read it someplace? I just know. And then it happens. How did that happen? I told you, I know. How did you know that? Intuition is powerful. I say it's access to the Great Spirit itself. I don't know what God looks like. I don't know what the Great Spirit looks like. I don't know what pure energy looks like. Well, I don't know what the Tao looks like. I don't know what Chi looks like. I just believe it's the source from which we all come, we're part of, we go back to, and it literally it is perfection, and we're from it in our imperfection. So, commitment to being unwavering to manifest your vision, and then living with integrity. I can't emphasize that enough. It doesn't mean you're living to be perfect. Once you've decided, and you have to decide what your values are, we have a tendency of taking on the values of those that we were around when we were infants, children, young adults. Oh, that's what everybody does, so that's what I do. But really, does it feel right? Does it resonate with your spirit? When you do it, does it seem like it's honoring? Ask yourself those questions. You might be surprised. And I'm not even going to tell you how you're going to be surprised, but ask yourself, what are your values? Write them down. Is collaboration a value of yours? Is creativity a value of yours? Is diversity a value of yours? And all of its manifestations, not just the obvious. Is equity a value of yours? Is love a value of yours? Some people it's not actually. Is truth a value of yours? What are your values? And that's when you're able to say, okay, I'm living the rest of my life synergistic with those values. That's what integrity is. Integrity is also, I commit to this and you remain committed. And if you can't do that, you apologize to self. If it's a commitment to self and you can't do it, you change the commitment so you can function with integrity. Same thing when you're interacting with other people. Wow, there's so much more. I know there are questions, so I'm going to come to the questions in a moment. I want you to think in terms of your vision. Envision big goal. If you know where you're going, you're likely to get there. If you don't know where you're going, you're just going to end up anywhere. And then 20 years has gone by if you're lucky. 2 days have gone by and you're like, well, things have not changed. I expect a change in 2 days. Well, did you do anything different? Well, I decided. Yeah, but did you do anything differently? So if you've done something historically, you continue to do it, you're going to get the same results. You want to get qualitatively different results, massive results compared to what you've gotten before, you're going to have to change something. Something has to change. And there has to be an emotional commitment to that in order for the actions to move in the same directions. So you get the results and you're not surprised. Like, well, of course I got those results. Everybody else is like, oh my God, that's brilliant. How'd you do that? Well, I decided after I visioned, I made a concrete goal. I listened, I received options, I planned accordingly, and then I took action. And then I continued to take action. I learned from my whatever, my failures, and I applied the new learning. I leveraged other people, mentors, hopefully, people who have already been successful, not people who are in the same space that you're in. Let's be very clear. There are a lot of wonderful folks who've got a lot of great ideas, who have a lot of advice. And so you have to always ask yourself, okay, I want to be at point B. Has this person ever even experienced point B? Do they even know what point B is? If the answer is no, honor what they have to say and keep stepping. Because if they don't know what B is and what it takes to get to B, they're not likely going to be able to help you. They may be able to thwart your ability to move forward with their advice, saying, oh, don't worry about it. Black folks don't get to do it. Oh, don't worry about it. Women don't get to do it. Don't worry about it. Short people don't get to do it. Don't, fill in the blank. If I told people what I was going to do before I did it, historically, I already know what their responses would have been because I told them after I did it. And their responses almost 100% was, I wouldn't consider it. It's too big of a challenge. Or, I'm sorry, they don't really hire Black and and female people for that role at that place. They have too many applications, etc. None of that mattered to me when I'm pursuing what I want, because the universe knows what I want, and there's perfection in the universe, not in me. I'm open enough to let the universe work its magic. And so everything that I wanted materialized. Why? Even things that I thought about that I didn't want materialized. I have to be clear about my thoughts. Clarity, clarity, clarity. Emotions pave way to greatness. Have you heard that? They really do. And again, you don't have to be out there, but you have to be emotionally committed. Emotions pave way to greatness. And what is another way of saying that? Let go. You don't have to control everything. Be clear, leverage, 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 keep moving, take action. You don't have to control, because what you do when you try to control, you break things. You break more. You don't have the knowledge of how to get to where you want to be when it's a massive goal you've never achieved before. So be open. Be in that space to grow. When you take action, and you're responsible, you don't blame, because there's no room for blame. You don't have time for that. And it's not relevant, because you've decided on this. You've taken the action. You're responsible. And you don't judge. You listen, listen, listen. You assess, 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 and then you make a decision and you move forward. You're not perfect, so it's okay to learn along the way. It's critical. When I say leverage, 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 leverage people who already been there, and not just one, multiple people who've achieved it. And you don't have to do it exactly the way he or she or they have done it. You leverage, whether they're in books or otherwise. There's so much more I want to share, but let's take the first question, or the next question, rather, the second question. Jack, can you put that on the screen? Can you describe a fixed versus open mindset? All righty, you saw the title, so hopefully what I shared helps to answer that question. I think the key thing is understanding that with the law of attraction, if we have a fixed mindset, then things are going to be exactly what we have settled on, whatever that happens to be, whether we think that we can change our mindset or not. The law of attraction, we're going to attract to us exactly what we think, what's in our mind. Likewise, we're vibrating that. We have thoughts around it. We take action. We're reinforcing to the environment that that's who we are, that we're in the growth space. So the universe gives us everything. We're constantly bombarded with all this new information. We've got to be open to it, leverage it, or if we're decided to be closed, nothing can enter. Next question. Is there a formula that will help me become a leader? Formulas. I love it when people ask for formulas. The most powerful formula, and if you have a pen, paper, write this down. Stop daily, at least for 5 minutes, and listen. Turn down all the noise. I don't care from any source. Find a sacred space you can go to regularly, or if you can't go to that same space, find spaces that are sacred for you and listen. Take that pen to paper and write down whatever comes to mind. Really doesn't matter what it is. Listen. Listen. And then begin to ask yourself the question, how do I manifest the kind of leadership that I value? You should know what that looks like, whatever that looks like. How do I manifest? And listen, let it come to you. Someone may say, did you ever, I'm curious. I just read this book, Think and Grow Rich. And you're like, maybe that's the universe telling me something. And you go to Think and Grow Rich, And what do you find? It's not just about money. It's really about fundamentally manifesting everything you want in your life, whether it's a partnership, whether it's a love relationship, whether it's family, whether it is whatever. And so what's in it? It's about desire. It's about faith. It's about auto-suggestion. It's about specialized knowledge. It's about imagination. A lot of things we talked about. It's about decision, persistence. Someone else comes to you and say, I was reading this book. It's so interesting. It's 177 mental toughness secrets of the world class. And you're like, check, another book I've got to read. It's about the habits of leaders and how they have remained steadfast no matter the circumstance, or because of the circumstance, they leverage them. Somebody else may say, wow, how did we change your mindset? Dr. Webb said something on Lead Live, and I don't have time to wait for her next broadcast. I just want to get deeply into understanding that. And they said, well, I just read this book, Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. This guy was a remarkable so-called plastic surgery. And what did he do? He changed people, made them beautiful. He worked with the stars in Hollywood and other people who had financial wealth. And they looked great coming out. He was known. That was the go-to person. But what he found is that some people walked away and they were happy and their whole emotional state changed. For the vast majority, emotional state did not change. Why? Because it was never about how they looked physically. It was what was going on inside. So he wrote this book, Psycho-Cybernetics. I mean, you can get it in a paperback, you can get it in different versions. So, when you decide that you want to become a particular kind of leader, whatever that means to you, a leader of corporation, a leader of a nonprofit community-based organization, a leader of an educational institution, a leader of a village, a leader of a family, whatever, decide that and then allow the universe to guide you to understand. Powerful in ways that you can't imagine. So I'd say first and foremost, that is the principal formula that I use. Primary. And then, of course, as part of that, I observe people. I observe people independent of whether I think I value them, to understand how they may have gotten to that role and how they're functioning in that role. And I try to get a sense of their values and if they're functioning synergistic with those values, on and on and on and on. And then I ask myself the question, is it helpful to even observe those? And then I go deeper. I find common characteristics of leaders, and that's what you're going to find in the books that I just referenced. But there's many others by remarkable women across the planet, by remarkable men across the planet, by young people, by elders, by middle-aged folks, folks we know, folks we don't even know of. Leverage the autobiographies of men and women to understand that what appears to be extraordinary success was not without a lot of mental toughness, a lot of, and arguably a lot of tragedies for a number of individuals and circumstances that they had to move through. And then some people have had a lighter life. Arguably, they're so more aligned with the universal laws that when they had a hiccup, they just course correct. They listened. Again, I start and I end with going within, listening. You can call it medication. It's my medication, meditation. You can call it dancing. You can call it drumming. Whatever gets you to that space where you can listen to your inner voice, that intuition. Oh my God, it's powerful. I can't emphasize the power of it. You can call it prayer. I don't care what you call it. When you're listening to your intuition, that higher source, whew, the vista is yours. Next question. How do I know that I can be a leader when I've not done so? Your answer will help me prepare for a promotion. When I saw that question, so many things came to mind, and it just flowed. So these are some of the questions. I'm just going to say them without interpreting them. This was coming from a higher source. What leadership role or roles are you aspiring to? What is your why? Which is it aligned with your passion, your commitment? What does the role require? What is embedded within the position or job description that you're interested in? Was there someone in the exact role before? Are the expectations for the new incumbent the same or comparable? Might you learn something from that individual who was in it before? Or might you learn whether it was from their successes and or failures? Will you be leading people, things, or both? What are the expected outcomes of your leadership? Assuming that you've got a particular position or positions already identified. What resources may be available to help you carry out your role effectively? You want to find out as much information as possible. A title may be interesting. It's like being a medical doctor, but then when you realize you're going to have to deal with a lot of fill in the blank, you're like, oh, it's not really what I wanted to be. It's a researcher I wanted to do, not be a medical doctor. Same thing with regards to leadership in any role. Asking yourself, what is it that I think I want? Why? And what kind of environment? Not all environments are the same. Uh, and yet what they have in common is there's at least people. And so what kind of people skills do you have? Do you really want to lead people? That requires a whole set that you may actually find to be awesome, and you may already have them. So when you say you've not been a leader, I always question people when they say that, and especially when people are on hiring committees, and I've been on many, led and then facilitated many hiring committees over 40 years. And let me just tell you, there's always this bias. When you're on the inside, you're like, well, can the person work here? Can they do it? Well, they've never worked in this environment before. Well, how will you know if they're not given the opportunity? One. And then two, how will you know if you've not, and assuming that they meet all the minimum qualifications, how will you know that person's not led if you've not heard his or her response to these kinds of questions, right? And then I would encourage you to ask yourself what you've done that reflect the answers that you've come up with, and what can you do in advance of pursuing the position, and certainly an interview, to prepare yourself for the role. Can you mentor someone, be mentored by someone who's already in the role or has been in the role? Can you shadow someone, literally observe them for a spell? Can you engage in some volunteer service related to that role so that you actually get to experience it? Can you do an interim assignment in that role if it's appropriate? So assume that this is something that may be a little bit uncomfortable for you, but assume that you already have leadership skills and abilities. Assume. Don't assume you don't. Assume. Do you plan for whatever reason? Do you come up with a goal and create a plan that's synergistic with that, identify strategies, and look for resources to ensure that you can carry out those strategies? Do you evaluate and assess your effectiveness? Well, that's part of leadership. Do you mobilize people? Do you engage in reflective thinking with them? Do you engage with planning with them? Do you inspire them? Are you part of helping to motivate your colleagues? And how do you go about doing that? Are you part of a team? Are you a collaborative? You may have skills that you can't even imagine that are directly aligned with the kinds of leadership roles that you would like to assume. So assume first that you may have some current knowledge, current skills, and then do the due diligence and see where there's alignment. Do not start with, I don't know, uh, therefore I'm not, and I have not done, or anything that negates the essence of you, because that's what this show is about, reminding you that embedded in each one of us is a leader. And what we want everyone to do is to be, uh, uh, one of my sisters inspired this in me when she asked the question in one of the previous shows. We want to inspire you to be your own CEO, your own chief executive officer. What does that mean? Study that. Doing that alone in a conscious way, deliberate way, will transform your life overnight. Trust me, do it. And if you find that I'm wrong, let me know. I am certain I'm right. Not because I want to be right, because I've experienced it, I've witnessed people, I've coached people in that regards, and without exception, I get out of the way because they're off. They're off and running. And so what is this statement? A growth mindset, action, and understanding of the universal laws have allowed me to reach all of the goals I set for myself despite challenges. That's it. These tools have allowed me to overcome and to achieve. There were times when it was really tough. And there were times when I was super broke and wanted to cry. I think there were times you actually cried. These areas around mindset work, they do. Can't emphasize enough. I firmly believe that we're never given too much that we can't handle. And there are magnificent examples across the globe of people being, I don't even want to use some of the images because the images, some of them are horrific, but going through these challenges, crisis, absolute traumatic experiences, and coming out to inspire us, to remind us of our inherent greatness. So going back to that universal law, what was it? Law of relativity. I think of young people who are doing remarkable things. I think of elders who've gone through so much. I think of ancestors who plowed through nonsense. I think about them across the globe, and I think about their experiences that dwarf mine, doesn't negate mine, but dwarf them in terms of when I may need to feel a little bit of pity. It's okay. I do a little pity party, usually quiet, alone, no one knows about it. And then I quickly get through it because it's like, get a clue, woman. You've got a lot going for you. You've got all these nieces and nephews, you've got these siblings, you've got these people you don't even know who need what you have to offer. And that's the other thing I want to end with. I want to remind us that just because you are here and you're doing whatever you're doing there does not mean you're invisible. In fact, I want you to remember that you are more visible than you think you are. Yes, you may be living alone. I get it. Yes, you, because of COVID, are even more isolated. I get it. Yet when you walk in that grocery store or when you drive down the street, the way you present yourself and that smile that you give to that child may affect that child. That child may need that smile in a way that you had no clue and may never have a clue. You may have saved that child's life because that child may have decided, I want to commit suicide because no one loves me. Sees your smile and it's like, oh my God, the world is not exactly what I thought it. There are more people that's remarkable. I remember being in Florida back in the when was this? This was the 90s, mid 90s. And I was in part of Florida that's really considered the deep south. You know, you got literally Po people and they're all beautifully black. I say beautifully because I didn't see a one person who wasn't beautiful. But I mean, they were Po. There was no sidewalks. They were just dirt. And their homes, a lot of them were classic shotgun homes. Hopefully those homes don't exist anymore, but the love and the care and the genius of those people continue in generations. But this little boy sat next to me when I was invited to go to a church with the person I was being mentored by. And he's white. He's put in the top row pier, and I'm told to sit next to him in the top pier, and only white folks were in the top pier. This is a black church, and I decided I wanted to sit with everybody else. So I act like I didn't hear that. I sat with everybody else in the congregation. I sat near the back, and there was this little boy sat next to me. I think to my left. And he whispered to me. He just watched how I watched. He watched how I moved, and he whispered and he said, white people don't like black people. And I was just, my whole body was humbled. And I looked at him this beautifully black boy, probably 7, 8 years old. He had experiences, and those experiences were to be honored. And I looked at him and I smiled, and I just put my head down and I whispered, and I said, some white people love us. And his eyes got big and he changed. And then I said, I have a sister-in-law who's white, and I've got other family members who are white. And I said, not everybody's ugly. And his body went to just a couple of days ago, I talked to someone I didn't even know was observing me in a leadership role, countywide leadership role. I won't mention his name to honor him, but he says, there was a major event, crisis, and the administrators, the leaders were afraid for good reasons. It was an onslaught of people to attack them intentionally. He said, you got in between them and the rest of us. Nobody else stood up for us. You stood up. I was like, what? He says, I never said thank you. I just want you to know, I remember that and I thank you. And I was just blown away. And then I remembered it. And I remember feeling like, why isn't anyone saying anything? So I just didn't stay long. I just went straight to neutralize the circumstances, calm things down. That's the power of you and I. We are all leaders in our various roles, whether it's with that little boy illuminating something to him that he never experienced so that he could possibly imagine something different, giving him factual information, but honoring his lived experiences. Or this individual who's in a major leadership role across the county who got to witness my adding value that I didn't even think was a big deal. Sometimes we don't know our impact. It's not about us knowing always. It's about us being present, being ready, and leading now. I want you to remember, leadership excellence and achievement on demand does not require that you be so-called book smart, although I think it's valuable to read text. It doesn't require that you have earned any degrees, although I value higher education. It doesn't require that you be a billionaire. It doesn't require that you have the ideal lived experiences. What it requires is an intention to be your best self and to grow where you're at and the way you want to grow. Thank you so much for being part of this. It's an honor to always serve you weekly, Wednesday, noon hour, Pacific Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Wherever you're at, whenever you see this, just know you're valued. We care about you, not just me. Many of us care about you. We may never meet you, but as the law of oneness makes very clear, there's divine order to everything, and we literally benefit from your health and well-being. Literally, not figuratively, literally. Why do?